Hi, Todd. I'm fine. How are you? Hello, I'm Jean Meserve, and welcome to an event cast we're calling A Resilient Future. Business thrives on certainty, but it is navigating uncertainty that really tests a business's resilience. We are, as you well know, in month 8 of a global pandemic. Many businesses have closed, others are facing new challenges. Some are struggling to stay afloat, others are dealing with an unprecedented crush of demand. So, how do you take the tumultuous events of 2020 and plug them into a spreadsheet to try and predict what's coming down the road? Well, chief financial officers are trying to do this to try and chart a stable and productive future. How are they doing? Well, we're going to check in with 2 CFOs today to find out what they are doing to practice resilience and chart a stable future this fiscal year and well beyond. Before we begin, I'd like to thank FM Global for sponsoring the Atlantic's Journalism Today. And I'd also like to remind all of you that we would love to have you participate. There is a Q&A function on your screen. Please use that to submit your questions. Tell us where you're calling from and please, or writing from, I should say. And if you could keep your questions short and succinct, that would be appreciated. And now, let me introduce our first guest, the Chief Financial Officer of Peloton, Jill Woodworth. Jill, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having us.
So this year has been spectacular for Peloton, has it not? What do your numbers look like for fiscal year 2020?
So, well, our fiscal year actually ends at the end of June. And at the end of June, in the rear view, we obviously had a couple of months benefit from some of the tailwinds created from the demand we saw with COVID-19. We did over $1.8 billion of revenue, and last week, during our first quarter's earnings call, we gave updated guidance for $3.9 billion for fiscal 21. So that would be the fiscal year ending next June. So certainly the tailwinds from COVID have allowed us to have our 6th consecutive year of over 100% growth since the company was founded in 2014.
So 2021 looks good for you, and presumably we're still going to be coping to some degree with the effects of COVID, gyms closing and so forth. But looking beyond that, beyond June, into the next fiscal year, when gyms potentially reopen and perhaps people go back for socializing and so forth, what do you think is going to happen then?
So we've long held the belief that fitness will move to the home. And that was a belief that we had well before COVID. When you look across other industries, you think about arcades and music stores, bookstores, movie theaters. Digital streaming media has had a profound impact on a lot of these industries. And we believe fitness is on the precipice of that same change as well. There's no more convenient, easier place to get a workout if you have the right equipment, the right instructors. And, we believe the Peloton platforms offers that solution, that merging of all of the things that get people engaged with a fitness program in the home, which is, I believe, where people ultimately want to exercise and work out. With that alternative just hasn't been a very attractive one prior to Peloton.
So that's what you believe is going to happen. But is it guesswork, or do you have some kind of data that substantiate that?
So we do a ton of research, and our belief, you look at right now, well, at least prior to COVID, there were nearly 200 people that were paying hard money month after month to access a gym in the form of the number of gym memberships globally. 90 million of those are in our 4 current markets that we're in, which is the US, the UK, Germany, and Canada. So, and we have about 1.33 million subscribers on our platform today. And represented because we do have household subscriptions. We often have couples or roommates or sometimes children that also have memberships with Peloton. That is that represents 3.66 million people out of the nearly 200 million people globally that are on our platform. So we think it's early innings for this transformation to occur. And everything that we've seen in terms of our market research, the interest in Peloton, the interest in working out from home, we believe, at least in our current markets, there are at least 20 million people that we believe would be interested in purchasing a Peloton bike or tread.
Although overall, this has been a great time for your company, COVID has presented some challenges, specifically with supply. You've had trouble keeping up with demand, haven't you?
We have. And just to put it into a little bit of context, uh, if you look back to our first quarter, which ends at the end of September, so Q1 of 2018, we did about $100 million of revenue. Last first quarter, we did about 225 million of revenue. Last quarter, we did just shy of 760 million revenue. So we've already in the last 24 months grown sevenfold when you look at first quarter performance over the last couple of years. So we've already done so much on the fly over the last 8 months, and even prior to that, we purchased one of our third-party manufacturers. We've increased our capacity by about 4 times just in the last 8 months. But the reality is the organic demand for our product just continues. We've obviously seen some spikes in COVID, one over the summer in some of the Sun Belt states. We're in the UK. They announced the new lockdown last week. And so we keep seeing these surges of demand. And in the midst of all this, in September, we did launch a new bike product. We announced the coming of a new lower price tread offering. And so, we're just trying to keep up a lot with the organic demand, but we don't think that's going to end when COVID is over. And we're doing everything possible we can, looking at every alternative from a manufacturing capacity standpoint to make sure that we're in a position to be able to sell millions of products a year going forward.
How long are the delivery delays now? Have you been able to shrink them with this new capacity that you've brought on board?
Yes, so for our original bike, which we did lower amidst all of this, we did lower the price of our original bike from 2245 to 1895 back in September when we launched Bike Plus, which is our new bike offering that went immediately on sale. Thankfully, with a lot of the supply chain capacity we've been able to build in, we're also building a new factory that opens in December, which we're really excited about in Taiwan. We are going to get down by the end of this calendar year for our original bike, of which we lowered the price of, we will get back to normal delivery timeframes, call it 2 to 3 weeks. Bike Plus, which is the new product we just launched, it's going to take a couple more quarters before we can get that into that same range. We just had an unexpected positive reception from the consumer with that product, and it exceeded our expectations. And so we're working hard to shift some of our capacity towards Bike Plus. So we're excited, though, by the end of this year that we will be able to get back to some normal timeframes, and which is going to be exciting for us because it's going to allow us to get back on the airwaves and really start marketing our products again, which we haven't done much of since the pandemic started, so as not to exacerbate the supply and capacity constraints that we were faced with.
So you've posited that you think your business is going to continue to grow, but it is uncertain. There are unknowns here. Do you have any concern that you've overbuilt your capacity, that you're going to end up with too much in the end?
No, and as a matter of fact, I continue to think that we are still in the top inning of top of the first inning of our growth. And our growth formula is very, very simple. Even with our products that we have on the market, we still see a tremendous runway for growth. We have a lot of growth in our bike line. And we think, first of all, just to give you a perspective, there are 35 million treads in U.S. homes today, many of which are the proverbial clothes hanger. We are launching a new tread that'll be available in the UK later this year and in the US early next year, that we believe is 2 or 3 times the market opportunity of bike. So we are going to continue to grow our footprint geographically, grow our existing products, and we're going to augment our existing products again with new products over time that we know the consumer wants. And I believe with our proven formula of this merging of hardware, software, and incredible instructors that are allowing us to create incredibly good content, we're just seeing off the charts engagement with our products. People love our products. In fact, in the first quarter, we reported that on average, per subscription per month, that people were using our products and working out with us almost 21 times in the month. So it's been phenomenal. And again, I believe with new product development, new geographies, we have so much runway ahead.
You mentioned earlier that a lot of these changes were done on the fly. No one expected COVID to come down the pike and have the impact it has on people's lives. How difficult was it for you to do this sort of rapid innovation that you were forced to do?
I would say it was difficult, except when I look in the rear view and I look at how resilient our teams have been and how successful we have been in hiring the teams that we need operationally in my finance organization, in our IT organization, and supply chain. We have been able, in a virtual world, we do have obviously our own delivery network, our own logistics platform. And of course, they're still out in the field, they're still out in warehouses, they're delivering bikes to our customers. But everyone else, our member support teams, everyone else is working virtually and remotely. And it took an incredible amount of coordination for the team and over communicating every single day with our teams to really kind of transition from what was a very strong and powerful office culture to working virtually and transitioning within 48 hours effectively to thousands of people working from home. So I just am so proud and of the resiliency and the continued productivity of our teams across the board and of our recruiting and hiring. Thankfully, we seem to be a brand that's attracting a lot of incredible talent. So we've also been able to, I've probably hired, my goodness, on finance, I've probably grown our team about 30%, just given the growth that we're seeing in the business, just in the last 8 months alone. So I have a lot of employees that have never even set foot in our office.
I'm wondering about that workforce issue. In a way, was this the perfect time to have to grow a workforce because there are so many people who have lost jobs in this environment? Did you have a wealth of individuals who were qualified and ready and eager to step up?
100%. The talent that we've been able to amass over the last several months has been great. But I think more than that, what I think truly inspires and attracts the best people is the company culture and frankly what we stand for and what we're doing for the world. And we want to improve people's lives through physical and mental well-being, and that's what our platform does. That's what we hear from our members every single day. And I love the fact that mission driven workforce is so attracted to coming to Peloton because it just fuels the excitement, it fuels their drive, it fuels innovation, and it's been wonderful to see. And I make a point of meeting all of the new hires on our team, and it's a resounding theme that I hear that it's just at Peloton, we feel like we're doing something great for the world. And it's an incredibly challenging environment as well. So for young finance professionals or young supply chain or brand marketing, it's just an incredibly challenging, fun opportunity. I liken it to drinking from a fire hose most days, but I think that's the challenge is something that everybody is rising to right now, which is wonderful to see.
We do have a couple of audience questions. Patrick in North Carolina asked this: is the recurring subscription business always going to be contingent on equipment sales as a lead product, or can Peloton eventually use that high margin business to allow other hardware equipment providers into the fold?
Yeah, so we believe that the real magic, right? And we do have a closed system today. I think you'd have to be MacGyver. For those of you who are old enough to know who MacGyver is, you'd have to be a MacGyver in order to figure out how to get your metrics off of a third-party piece of equipment and have that talk to the app and really have the type of immersive experience that we're able to create with our own hardware. And I think we've heard a lot of people who obviously they already have a stationary bike. So what they do is they download our app and then they use our app and our content with that third party piece of hardware. But the reality is the affordability and the value proposition for our hardware. And again, that immersive experience when you can mesh it all together very, very seamlessly and perfectly. I mean, we have a leaderboard um, where you can compete or where you can ride with your friends. On a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, you can all hop into the same class. You can high five each other. You can't do that on third party equipment. So it's not that we don't love the fact that there are people that are digital subscribers to our app and use third party equipment to do it. But I do think the experience is just not the same. And the value proposition of our bike is pretty compelling. It's $49 a month to finance our bike. And you look at the average gym membership, that's $58 a month in the US. So we think the value is there, especially with our engagement.
And we have another question from Sunil in Michigan who asked, Jill, does Peloton have any plan to expand into the strength fitness area? You're doing that, aren't you?
Oh, we are, and we have a ton of incredibly good strength programming, and we have a couple different flavors of it for full body workouts and cardio. We offer bike boot camp now, which is strength training combined with cardio, so you get a really highly efficient workout. And we do the same on our tread. We just launched bar classes, which is ballet inspired a strength class. We have much more to come there. We've hired specifically strength instructors and are doing strength instruction for our UK and German markets now. And it's really been our fastest growing fitness vertical over the last several months.
Jill, before we leave, I want to get your words of wisdom for other business leaders who are trying to navigate through this for many companies, difficult time. What would your pearls of wisdom be?
Over communicate. It is exhausting, I think, working in a world where you're constantly on Zoom calls and Google Hangout meetings and Skype. And but I have found in some ways by over communicating, having a lot of one-on-one time with my team, making sure they're okay mentally, physically, work wise, and checking in with people. And again, it has to come from a place of authenticity and truly caring about your people. But I think that goes a long way right now in this world where we're feeling very isolated and very separated from one another. And so, in some ways, I feel closer to my team because we've been able to make that extra effort to communicate. Where sometimes you're in the office and you say hello, but this is where you really have better one-on-one time. So I've been trying. It's exhausting, but I think it's paid off. And just making sure that everybody is still doing okay mentally. This is a really tough time for people, and we have to understand that.
Jill Woodworth, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Great. All right. Thank you.
And now we're going to turn to a session brought to us by our underwriter, FM Global. Please welcome Brett Onnell, Executive Vice President at FM Global, here with author and Pulitzer Prize nominated financial journalist Russ Banham.
Hi, I'm Russ Banham, and with me today is Brett Onnell at FM Global. Brett, good to be talking with you again.
Likewise, good to see you, Russ.
Great. So just weeks ago, the World Economic Forum declared that on top of COVID-19, weather events, extreme ones, continue to be a top global risk for companies doing business, threatening both their operations and their financial value. Doesn't insurance take care of that? Why worry?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, in the face of any disruptive event, and you named a few of them, we've had plenty in 2020, and then throw a pandemic on top of all of that. And then in addition to that, we have our normal human-related events, the fires and mechanical breakdown, to name a few. But, oftentimes after a major event like this, the difference between a major disaster that's going to have longer-term implications to the business and maybe a minor distraction that's probably not going to linger all that long, but it's going to be a bit of a discomfort, a bit of a distraction, a little bit of cleanup for a couple of days. The difference between the two often does come down to a choice that any company can make, and that's the choice to be resilient, or to just rely upon hope or good fortune to get you through it. But when you look at the role of insurance, I mean, insurance is going to protect you against the distraction. I mean, that's truly what insurance is built to do. But disasters can, and they often do, have long-term consequences. And they are going to stretch beyond, the normal insurance recovery. And one of those implications, as we found, is going to be the loss of long-term shareholder value.
And we're talking about risk mitigation here. What are companies doing right in terms of managing those physical exposures? What are they doing right? Where are they getting it wrong?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think maybe I'll answer it just around the psychology of risk improvement, for lack of a better term. But, we're all humans, and you think about, it's hard to imagine the unimaginable ever occurring, because we always are going to hide behind the fact it's not going to happen to me. It never has. It's always going to happen to the other guy. I'm better than that, whatever the scenario may be. But when you start looking at great companies and great leadership behind those organizations, they're not afraid to answer or ask the question of the what if scenario. It may be as remote as ever, but what if that Category 4 hurricane were to strike? What if that river were to have its boundaries overtopped and I get 2 feet of water in my facility? Or what if that fire starts in the warehouse and it makes its way through my facility and I lose a critical building? And if the answer to all that, the outcome is a completely acceptable one and there's no long-term implications, I've analyzed it, I've had the facts, great. You'll sleep well at night, you've done your due diligence. But I do think, though, that oftentimes the scenario runs deeper than that. And it runs through the insurance recovery period, and you start to bring in things like loss of market share, loss of investor confidence in future cash flows, and even things like major reputational damage, things that are going to take months, if not years, to recover from, and they all have dollar signs attached to them. That when you add it all up, it may not be an acceptable outcome, and it may have major implications to the well-being of your organization. And if that's going to occur, then the answer is to take action now to prevent that from ever occurring, and that's invest in risk improvement. So ultimately, it does come down to a choice to be resilient. And it comes down to really, do you want to be having that conversation with your board, just talking about a success story, or having that conversation just trying to defend a disaster that you now have on your hands?
So we're talking money at a time when a CFO has so many competing demands for capital. How do you make the argument that risk resilience is worth it?
just to kind of tell you a quick story, we actually had commissioned a firm, an analytics firm, earlier in the year to look at that correlation between big losses and ultimate impact on shareholder value. And we looked at it in the aftermath of the two major years of hurricanes, 2017 and 18, with Harvey, Irma, Maria, and then Florence and Michael in 18. And what this firm did is they looked at a number of publicly traded companies that had experienced financial damage, and they reported on their annual 10K statements. And what they found was that those companies that had reported the damage had seen their shareholder value drop by on average about 5% the ensuing year. So we didn't stop there. We said, well, let's take a look at the FM Global portfolio. We insure about 1 out of 3 Fortune 1000 companies, and we make loss prevention recommendations to all of our clients around the globe to really help them prevent against acts of God and man-made events. And what we found was that those companies who had followed all of our advice and had done all the recommendations that we had asked them prior to those hurricanes occurring and had really fortified their locations actually saw their shareholder value rise on average of about 7% or about $2 billion. And conversely, the other set of clients that were exposed to those same events that hadn't quite got to everything yet. And we saw the aftermath of those clients that saw their shareholder value drop by an average of around 3%, or the tune of about $1.5 billion. So it's about a 10-point swing or about $3.5 billion. And that's really the difference between, for lack of a better term, the winners and the losers after a major event.
So there is a connection. Dollars well spent on long-term value. Brett, thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone as well. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Russ.
And thank you to FM Global for your support of the Atlantic's journalism today. And now I would like to bring in Niam Gandhi. He is the Chief Financial Officer for the Mount Sinai Health System in New York. Thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a heck of a year for the health system in the United States. How has Mount Sinai come through it? How would you assess your performance?
First I would say our frontline caregivers were, nothing short of absolutely incredible. As most of you probably know, New York was the first city to get hit hard with the COVID pandemic, and so. We diagnosed our first COVID patient on February 29th, and by the middle of March we were almost overrun. We peaked at 2,300 COVID inpatient hospitalized COVID inpatient patients on April 8th, and we normally only have about 2,300 hospital beds. So we had surged all of our capacity about 50%. Had to procure personal protective equipment for everybody. Brought in additional physicians and nurses, spread things across the system, had people doing all sorts of jobs that they previously didn't do. And that wasn't just the clinical staff. We had, IT professionals carrying boxes in warehouses. So everybody really came together. And I, know the discussion we're having today is about resiliency, and, showed that resiliency and that nimbleness, especially in those first, kind of horrendous 6 weeks of the back half of March and all of April. Couldn't be more proud to be part of the organization.
It sounds from the way you're talking about it that there was a lot of improvisation. Was there?
There was, and it was on a daily basis. Really, we've invested over the past few years in building a centralized command center that helps direct our operations for kind of more typical things in non-crisis times. Transfers between hospitals, ensuring we have adequate capacity, and really that command center, which was run by our chief operating officer and our chief clinical officer, really stepped up and forced us to improvise, or allowed us to improvise. Really, multiple daily huddles of the entire leadership team of all of operations, making calls on the fly as we needed to adapt. Healthcare, especially healthcare delivery, tends to be a really stable business. 2019 looked a lot like 2018, looked a lot like 2017. And there are things in the public policy space. There are things in the reimbursement climate. There are slowly changing patient demands. But on a day-to-day basis, things are largely stable. And during the height of the pandemic, things were anything but stable. So you're right, a ton of improvisation to kind of get us through what we needed to and deliver the best care we could for our patients.
So here we are with cases of COVID surging. It's also flu season. There's going to be an intersection of the two. Would you say that you're much better prepared for this than you were the first time around?
Yeah, I think we're better prepared for a few reasons. One, of course, is just the simple timing. We had, again, especially in New York, we had very little time to prepare the first time, and again, everybody stepped up tremendously and was able to, to achieve great things. We've had months now to prepare our playbooks, and actually, our state government has done a great job working with us to develop emergency preparedness plans. We have 90 days of at peak use of all of the important pieces of personal protective equipment. We have surge plans to increase our capacity 20%, 50%, 100%, based on different metrics. We have all sorts of business continuity operations plans that we developed, and then we have just kind of the soft experience of having been through it before. And then the other thing that I would say is, fortunately, we've learned a lot clinically about this disease. And, actually, some of our researchers just published recently that between the first few months of COVID versus the most recent couple of months, the mortality rate of hospitalized patients is down, almost 50%. And it's because as a community, as a medical community internationally, we've learned a lot about how to treat this disease when it presents in the most acute settings. The number of patients on ventilators has come way down compared to March or April. The survival rates, as I mentioned, are up, and so the strain to the system now, as it's as we're seeing second waves in many parts of the country, or first waves in parts of the country that never had a first wave, is a little bit less, fortunately, because of everything science has kind of learned about the disease since then.
Jorge has a question for you. He writes, how are you preparing for the post-pandemic future? Can you articulate the three capabilities to describe what you do uniquely better than anyone else?
Oh, well, I'd like to think we'll be uniquely better on these few things that I mentioned, but I think there are a few areas that we're really focused on in the post-pandemic world, and so I'd say one is consumer demands have changed for healthcare quite a bit, and there were endemic shifts that we were seeing over the past half decade or so, and COVID really accelerated them. And so, just one example, demand around convenience for telemedicine. We built a lot of telemedicine capability back in 2018 and 2019, and candidly, getting some patients to use it was like pulling teeth. They would answer in a survey, "Yes, I would use it," but when given the option, they always chose the in-person care. And so we did under 1% of our visits via telemedicine in 2019. In the peak of the COVID crisis, kind of second half of March and all of April, we were doing as many visits per day of telemedicine as we did in all of 2019 in the whole year. It was over 60% of our visits. We were doing thousands upon thousands. We peaked at, I think, about 8,500 on one day. All of the physicians who had previously said, well, my patients wouldn't use it, all the patients who said, yeah, sounds interesting, but I'd rather come in person, they all started using it. And we've leveled off now, in-person care is back and running, but we're still over 10% telemedicine. And it's because, patient demands have changed. And that's a small example. It's true for a lot of other areas of patient convenience, where, again, I think we were seeing shifts in the past, but being technology enabled, bringing the care that patients want to them in the modality that they want, that fits best into their life. I think we had this kind of catalytic event where now patients realize that they've experienced the other side of it and they want it. And so we're continuing to heavily invest there. The second area I would say is a continued focus on the value of the care that we deliver. What's happening right now is that there's a little bit of a declining pie of healthcare in our community, especially in a dense urban environment. Some people have left New York. Utilization is down a little bit. Some people are afraid to come back in and get care, even though we've done a great job, and as have all of our competitors in the market done a great job making the environment safe for people to return. And so when you have a slightly shrinking pie, you need to really focus on what differentiates. And so Our focus here is really on the best value of care, and I define value as kind of outcomes over cost. We think we're efficient. Our pricing kind of shows that we're more efficient than most of the rest of the market here. And on the outcomes basis, different people define the outcomes differently. For some people, it's convenience. For some people, it's a certain type of quality on a very specific disease that they have. For some people, it's how well their physician communicates. It's a whole set of different things, and so we're really trying to optimize around the value of care that we deliver. And then the third thing I would just mention, which probably ties more to the financial resiliency, is we have a big focus on revenue diversification on the heels of the pandemic. This was a massive shock to the system for all hospitals. Increased cost, dramatically increased cost as we had to deal with the COVID pandemic, but simultaneously significantly decreasing revenues because most of the care that we were providing was being put on hold. And so it was a tremendous financial shock to the system, again, to our health system and others. Fortunately, we got some government aid. Our industry got some government aid in the space, but it really heightened our focus on revenue diversification, on commercializing our innovations that are coming out of our medical school, which we've had a strong history of doing, and are ramping up our efforts to do even more, on changing our payment models towards population health, in terms of getting paid more to keep patients healthy rather than just to treat their disease. And that P&L in our business moves kind of countercyclically to the rest of it, and had a very good year. And so we're taking a step back and looking at the stability of our revenue model going forward, and we think we've done a great job there to date, but we'll do even better going forward.
This is a perfect segue into a question we have from Tara, who says, I understand that hospitals across the country are going bankrupt or forced into mergers. Hospitals are seeing more patients than ever. One might think as a business that they're doing well, but it seems they're not. You've laid out the Mount Sinai case, but for Tara's benefit, can you explain what's happening with some of these other hospital systems?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of this was a trend that was happening before COVID. The number of hospitalizations per 1,000 patients has been going down annually, year over year in the U.S., which actually, if you think about it from a societal standpoint, is good. We're taking better care of people. We're keeping them healthier. And there are lots of trends in the opposite direction. There's increased burden of chronic disease, and so we're trying to combat those trends. And so there's slightly declining volume for a lot of hospitals depending on their geography. There's a tremendous amount of reimbursement pressure, and if you think about a typical hospital in a community anywhere in the country, they're typically the largest employer in their community. The community relies on them for jobs, for stable wages, with appropriate market increases to those wages, which are the biggest cost input for a hospital. And then meanwhile, you have most Medicaid budgets are shrinking year over year reimbursement. Medicare is giving under a cost of living increase in the hospital reimbursement. Employers who pay for commercial insurance can't afford to continue to pay more. Benefits are usually the second largest line item on their P&L after salaries. And so there's a lot of cost pressure on healthcare, and that's a problem that we have nationally. And there's lots of public sector and private sector attempt to address that. But a typical community hospital somewhere in Middle America is caught in the middle there, with having to continue to care for the community, having to continue to play that important role in the community. Also, most hospitals are not for profits that operate under a community mission, and so they're caring for these patients, but the money isn't coming in.
Joseph wants to learn a little more about the impact on non-inpatient care. Has it returned to pre-COVID levels? When do you expect it to? And what does that mean for the financial health of hospitals?
It's starting to return. I think we're depending on which geography, for our system at least, we're anywhere between kind of 90 to back up to 100% of pre-COVID levels on most of our non-inpatient, admitted patient care, outpatient surgeries, physician office visits. I think it'll continue to return slowly over the course of next year. when we have a vaccine that's widely distributed and enough herd immunity, I think we'll see another lift there. I do think it's important to not forget about some of the demographic shifts that happen in terms of where patients are living and where they're consuming care. I think people there has been a decline in population in some of the dense urban centers. I don't know if that population will come back right away or a little bit more slowly, and so you may see, post-vaccine, a little bit of increased utilization in suburban areas and maybe a little bit of decreased utilization in urban areas if the populations don't return in the same way.
I'd like to ask you a workforce question. This has been an incredibly stressful time in the workforce. I have to believe that there are people who are dropping out of the healthcare field. Has this whole experience taught you that the country needs to develop a more robust healthcare workforce?
Yeah, I think it absolutely does, probably in two ways. One, we certainly need to continue investing in areas that are growing in healthcare, specialized areas. You're right that there was a lot of burnout. Some hospitals, as they've studied their populations, are seeing up to 25% diagnosis of depression, anxiety, or PTSD on the heels of COVID. So that's really tough. And so certainly continuing to replenish the supply in the workforce of the critical skills that we need, and investing in the workforce that exists and investing in their resilience and their ability to continue the missions that they've dedicated their careers to. The other thing, though, that I think is an opportunity, and I'm an optimist at heart, so I'll frame it in the positive here. I think there's an opportunity for healthcare to reinvent its workforce in a way that is more nimble, more resilient, more adaptive to improvisation by learning from other industries.
More cross-training, for instance?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I think that's something that healthcare has generally, at least the healthcare delivery sector, has generally not done well. It's been fairly siloed, where if you are the director of X, you then wait for your boss to retire so you can be the senior director of X and then the VP of X. And I think other industries have done a better job with that cross-training, cross-pollination, and that's something we can learn from in healthcare.
I want to ask you also about ransomware attacks. Many hospitals across the country have been victimized. I don't know if you have, but did you find yourself in the middle of this pandemic having to invest more heavily in cyber protections?
Yeah, we did for two reasons. One, there's a significant increase in the incidence of ransomware. Most of those who are watching here have probably seen the news articles from the past 2 weeks about the FBI advisories on this, and many hospitals.
Were you hit, by the way?
We were not, and many have been, and it's challenging. And we talked to many of those who have been, and trying to learn lessons and learn what we can do to be resilient there. In parallel, though, we moved 10,000 members of our workforce remote. And previously, we didn't have as much of a remote infrastructure. We're doing more things virtually that we previously only did in person. And so we had to invest in more cybersecurity, and we've done a great job there. We have a relatively new CIO who's led our initiatives there. She's fantastic at this. And so I feel comfortable from that standpoint that we have our eyes on the ball. But it's going to continue to be an area of investment in the healthcare space, especially in the coming years.
So your biggest lessons about resilience from this entire pandemic experience?
I loved what Jill said about over communicating, and I think the corollary to that is assuming the best intent in people. Part of what allowed us to be nimble and improvise well was that we really trusted each other as a team, and we're used to being able to look at each other eye to eye, face to face, and have these conversations. And now most of us are back in the office, but for a while, we were bouncing around different places. We didn't have that, and so you really do need to trust people at a greater level to be able to resolve something that previously would have been a 20-minute in-person conversation with a quick email or a text back and forth. And that requires that benefit of the doubt, the trust of the best intent of everybody that they're trying to do what's right for the organization. And I think we really showed that during the crisis. And I really want to make sure we harness that and keep that in the future, because I think it'll help us with all of our objectives going forward.
Niamh Gandhi, Chief Financial Officer of Mount Sinai System in New York. Thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that concludes today's program. Thanks to all of you who participated in our conversation. And thanks to FM Global for their support of the Atlantic's journalism today. We hope that today's program was a valuable experience for you. We would love all of you to share your thoughts via our survey. You'll find it in the chat. Also, you'll receive an email which will send that survey directly into your inbox. And please visit theatlantic.com/live for future events. We certainly hope you'll join us. I'm Jean Meserve. Stay healthy.